Do you know the specific nausea of standing in your own driveway and feeling like a trespasser? I drove up to find a 26-foot truck blocking my path, and my mother directing movers to carry a sofa through my wide-open front door. She was not visiting. She was nesting. I did not scream or plead. Instead, I did the one thing they never expected. I turned my flesh and blood into a cold, hard case number. My name is Olivia Ross, and I was breaking 3 different traffic laws when I crossed the county line into Pelican Cove. My knuckles were white against the leather steering wheel, reflecting a tension that had started as a dull throb at the base of my skull and had now erupted into a full-blown migraine. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays were supposed to be for strategy meetings and quarterly reviews at Brinefall Development, not for careening down a coastal highway because your neighbor called you sounding like she was witnessing a felony in progress. Marla, the sweet retired librarian who lived next door to my beach house, had left a voicemail that was equal parts apologetic and terrified. She asked if I was moving back in. She asked why I had not told her. And then she asked, in a whisper that chilled my blood, why the people moving my things looked like they were arguing with the front door lock. I made the drive from the city in under 90 minutes, usually. The scent of the salt air and the sight of the dunes signaled my brain to decompress, to switch off the high-functioning survival mode I needed for my corporate life. Today, that salt air tasted like bile. I turned the corner onto Sandpiper Lane, and my heart did not just drop. It plummeted. The house was my sanctuary. I had bought it 4 years ago. A dilapidated foreclosure that smelled of mildew and regret, and I had poured every bonus, every overtime check, and every ounce of my sanity into renovating it. It was the one thing on this earth that was mine. Solely mine, or so I thought. A 26-foot rental truck was parked diagonally across my crushed-shell driveway. It was not just blocking the path, it was dominating it. The rear tires had rolled off the hardscape and were currently grinding my prize-winning blue hydrangeas into the mud. The loading ramp was extended, a metal tongue lolling out onto my porch, and the front door, my custom mahogany front door that I had sanded and stained with my own hands, was propped wide open with a brick. It felt physically violent. It felt like walking in on a surgery being performed on yourself. I slammed the gear shift into park and killed the engine, but I did not get out immediately. I watched. Through the windshield, the scene played out like a silent film of a home invasion where the invaders were smiling. My mother, Linda, stood in the center of the walkway. She was wearing her resort casual linen pants and a wide-brimmed hat, pointing a manicured finger at 2 men I did not recognize. They were burly, sweating, and carrying my Italian leather armchair, the one I forbid anyone else from sitting in, out of the truck and toward my living room. Then I saw Kara. My older sister was not helping with the heavy lifting. Of course not. She was walking breezily out of the house carrying a tray of lemonade, acting the part of the benevolent hostess in a home she did not own. Her 2 children, 5 and 7 years old, were shrieking with joy, chasing each other around the side of the house with water guns, trampling the dune grass I had spent $2,000 restoring just last spring. The rage that hit me was cold. It was not the hot red flash of temper. It was the absolute zero of a glacier calving. I opened the car door and stepped out. The humidity hit me, thick and heavy. "Put it down," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried. The 2 men struggling with the armchair paused, looking relieved for an excuse to stop. They looked at me, then at the house, then back to the woman in the linen pants. Olivia. Mom turned, her face lighting up with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. It was the smile she used when she was caught looking through my diary in high school. A smile that said, "I am doing this for you. You made good time. We did not expect you until the weekend." "Put the chair down," I repeated, walking toward them. My heels clicked rhythmically on the paved walkway. "And take it back to the truck. Don't be rude to the movers, Olivia," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. "Keep going. Boys, living room, by the fireplace. Pivot carefully. If you take one more step with my furniture," I told the movers, making direct eye contact with the larger one, "I am calling the police and reporting a burglary in progress. I am the owner of this property. Put it down. The men lowered the chair onto the driveway immediately. They were hired muscle, not family. They did not get paid enough to navigate the minefield of the Ross family dynamic. Honestly, Liv, a voice drawled from the porch. Kara was sipping the lemonade, looking down at me with that pitiable expression she had mastered in her 20s. You are scaring the kids. Why do you always have to start with the drama? Drama. I looked from the truck to the house. You are moving into my house. You did not ask. You did not call. You just showed up with a moving truck. We are not moving, Kara said, descending the stairs. She looked tired. I noted, the kind of tired that comes from bad decisions and the expectation that someone else will fix them. We are just consolidating. It has been a rough quarter for Mike and me. We need a reset. And Mom said the beach house was just sitting here. The beach house is not sitting here, I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. It is my home. I am here every other weekend. Every other weekend, Mom interjected, stepping between me and the movers, physically blocking my path to my own front door. Exactly. 2 days out of 14. Do you know what the occupancy rate of this asset is? Olivia, 14%. It is a waste. A sin. Really, to have all this space, all this ocean view, and let it sit empty and cold while your sister is struggling in that cramped apartment. It is my house, I said. I pay the mortgage. I pay the taxes. I pay the insurance. And we are a family, Mom countered, her voice dropping to that dangerous, disappointed register. This house. It is too much for one person. It is selfish to hoard it. We are just bringing some life into it, warming it up. By breaking and entering, I asked. Oh, stop using legal words, Kara snapped. You gave Mom a key 3 years ago. For emergencies, I said. For a hurricane, not for an invasion. I looked past them, into the cavernous back of the truck. This was not a few suitcases for a long stay. I saw mattresses. I saw a dining table that I recognized from Kara's old apartment. I saw boxes labeled kitchen, winter clothes, and toys. They were not visiting. They were eradicating me. You're moving furniture in, I said, pointing to the boxes. You're bringing your entire life here. Well, we couldn't leave it in storage, Kara said, as if that explained everything. Storage costs $200 a month. Why pay that when we have a garage here? I don't have a garage, I said. I have a carport, and it is for my car. We can park on the street, Mom said. Problem solved. See, you are looking for problems where there are only solutions. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. I looked over at the hedge that separated my property from Marla's. Marla was standing there, holding a pair of garden shears, freezing in place like a statue. She had heard everything. Her eyes were wide, darting between me and my mother. Good. I needed a witness. Marla, I called out. My mother whipped her head around, her smile faltering for a fraction of a second. She hated being perceived as anything less than perfect by the outside world. Hi, Marla, I said, keeping my voice steady. I am sorry about the noise. There has been a misunderstanding. These movers will be leaving shortly. Oh, it's fine. Olivia, Marla stammered. I just thought you were selling the place. She is not selling, Mom shouted over the hedge, beaming a predatory smile at Marla. We are just utilizing the family assets. Multi-generational living is all the rage in Europe. You know. I turned back to my mother. This is not Europe, and this is not a family asset. Kara stepped forward, her face flushing. Actually, it is. Mom and Dad gave you $5,000 when you closed on this place. I saw the check. I stared at her. The down payment was $60,000. I paid $55,000. They gave me $5,000 as a housewarming gift to buy furniture. Money is money, Kara shrugged. They invested. That makes it common property, equity, whatever you want to call it. You can't just kick family out of a house they helped buy. The delusion was breathtaking. It was a perfectly constructed alternate reality where my hard work was communal property and their lack of planning was a collective emergency I was obligated to solve. "I want everyone off my property," I said. "Now, tell the movers to load the chair back up, pack the truck, and leave." Linda laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound, like a branch snapping. "Don't be ridiculous. Olivia, the boys are paid for 4 hours. We are not turning around now. We are already unpacked in the master bedroom." The world tilted slightly on its axis. "You are in the master bedroom?" I asked. "Well, Kara and Mike need the second room for the kids," Mom explained reasonably, "and I certainly cannot sleep on the sofa with my back. It is just logistics. Honey, don't take it personally." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, not because I intended to stay with them, but because I needed to hear her say it. "The den is lovely," Mom said. "We bought a pull-out couch. It's very cozy, and it's only for a while, just until Kara gets back on her feet, or until you realize how nice it is to have people around." They had thought of everything. They had spent days, maybe weeks, planning this. They had hired movers. They had packed their lives. They had driven 3 hours, all without sending me a single text message. They relied on the fact that I was the good daughter, the one who avoided conflict, the one who would sigh and complain but ultimately make up the guest bed and cook dinner because family is family. They were banking on the Olivia from 10 years ago, but the Olivia from 10 years ago did not own a $750,000 property and manage a team of 20 people. I checked my watch. "I'm going inside," I said. "If this truck is not moving in 10 minutes, I'm calling the towing company, and then I am calling the sheriff." "You wouldn't dare," Kara sneered. "You are not going to arrest your own mother." "Watch me," I whispered. I walked past them. I had to physically shoulder past Kara, who stood her ground on the bottom step until the last possible second. I walked up the porch stairs, stepping over the brick that was propping my door open. "Olivia, stop this instant." Mom's voice lost its sugary coating. It was the command voice now, the one that used to make me freeze when I was 6. "You are embarrassing yourself in front of the neighbors." I kicked the brick away. The heavy mahogany door swung free. I caught it, stepped across the threshold, and slammed it shut in their faces. The sound was thunderous. Immediately, I threw the deadbolt, then the secondary lock I had installed last year. "Olivia." The pounding started instantly, fists against the wood. "Open this door. My purse is in there, Olivia." I leaned my back against the door, sliding down until I hit the floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands, which had been so steady when I held the steering wheel, were now vibrating uncontrollably. I gasped for air. The silence of the house clashing with the muffled shouting from the other side of the wood. I was inside. They were outside, but the house felt infected. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly, and walked into the living room. It was a disaster. Boxes were stacked everywhere. My minimalist, carefully curated space looked like a flea market. A sticky residue was already on my coffee table juice, probably. I walked into the kitchen. My kitchen, the place where I drank my coffee in silence while watching the sunrise. The counters were covered in clutter. Cereal boxes, a blender I didn't own, a stack of mail that wasn't mine, but one piece of paper, taped conspicuously to the granite island, caught my eye. It was fresh from a printer, the paper still crisp white against the dark stone. I walked over to it, my breath catching in my throat. It was a floor plan, a crude, hand-drawn map of my house, but labeled with aggressive black marker. The master bedroom had Linda Ray written across the bed. The guest room was labeled Ikara, Mike Kids. The living room had a zone marked Play Area, and there, in the corner, was the den, my home office, a room that was barely 10 feet by 10 feet, with no closet and a window that looked out at the HVAC unit. Written in the smallest letters on the page, right over the space where my desk used to be, was a single name, Olivia. I stared at the paper. They hadn't just moved in. They had rezoned my existence. They had demoted me to a guest in my own life. The shaking in my hands stopped. The fear evaporated, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a blade. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't look at the text messages flooding in from Kara. I didn't look at the 5 missed calls from Mom. I opened the camera app and took a picture of the floor plan. Then I walked to the window, took a picture of the truck, ensuring the license plate was visible. Then, I dialed the non-emergency line for the Pelican Cove Police Department. "Dispatch," a voice answered. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, hollow, metallic, and absolutely resolute. "I would like to report a trespassing in progress. I am the homeowner. The intruders are refusing to leave." "Are the intruders known to you, ma'am?" I looked down at the paper on the counter, at my name, written in the smallest room. "Yes," I said. "They are people I used to know." The silence inside the house was not peaceful. It was heavy, vibrating with the residual energy of the invasion I had just halted. I stood in the kitchen, my back pressed against the cold granite of the island, listening to the muffled sounds of indignation coming from the driveway. I could hear my mother's voice, shrill and performing for an audience of one, my neighbor, and Kara's lower, whining tone, the sound of a woman who has never been told no without eventually getting a yes to make it go away. In every family, there is an invisible ledger. In the Ross family, the accounting had always been rigged. There are 2 kinds of people in this world, the ones who take, and the ones who give until they are hollowed out, just to keep the takers from making a scene. I looked around my living room. A box labeled Kara's summer clothes sat on my coffee table, leaving a ring of dust. It was a physical manifestation of a dynamic I had spent 32 years trying to outrun, growing up. Peace was not a state of being. It was a ransom I paid. I was the sturdy one, the reliable one, the one who didn't need braces because my teeth were good enough, while Kara needed 5 years of orthodontia that cost as much as a small sedan. I was the one who went to a state university on a partial scholarship and worked nights at a diner, while Kara found herself at a private art college that produced no degree but generated a mountain of debt my parents quietly absorbed. Kara was always the damsel in distress. She was a professional victim of circumstance. Her landlords were always unreasonable. Her bosses were always tyrants. Her boyfriends were always misunderstood geniuses until they were deadbeats. And whenever her life collapsed, which happened with the regularity of the tides, my parents were there with a safety net woven from excuses and money they didn't really have. And where was I? I was the safety net's anchor. I was the one expected to understand. "You are so strong, Olivia," my mother would say, usually right before asking me to step aside. "Kara needs more help. You are fine. You are always fine." It was not a compliment. It was a dismissal. I walked over to the sliding glass door that looked out onto the deck. I didn't open it. I just stared at the ocean, churning gray and white in the distance. This house was supposed to be the line in the sand. I bought this place 4 years ago. It was a wreck, a foreclosure that smelled like dead fish and cigarette smoke. I saw the potential in the bones of the structure, but more importantly, I saw a fortress. It was 3 hours away from my parents' house in the suburbs. It was 3 hours away from Kara's chaotic orbit. When I signed the closing papers, my hands had shaken, not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming joy of ownership. For the first time, my name was on something that Kara couldn't borrow, break, or stain, or so I thought. The argument about the money, the $5,000, was an old song. I remembered the day they gave it to me. I had just closed on the house. I had depleted my savings. I was eating ramen noodles and sleeping on an air mattress in the empty living room because I couldn't afford a bed yet. Mom and Dad had driven down for the day. They handed me a check for $5,000 inside a card that said, "Congratulations on your milestone." "We want to be part of this," Dad had said, beaming. "Buy yourself a nice couch, something worthy of the view." I had hesitated. I knew the rules of engagement. In my family, gifts were never gifts. They were down payments on future obligations. But I was tired, and I was broke, and I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were just being parents. I took the check. I should have burned it. That $5,000 was less than 10% of my down payment. It was a fraction of the mortgage I paid every month. But in their minds, that check had metastasized. It had grown interest. It had purchased equity. In the twisted logic of Linda Ross, that $5,000 bought them the right to treat my sanctuary like a timeshare. I moved away from the window and began to pace. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I started picking up the items they had already brought inside. A plastic bag full of bath toys, a stack of romance novels, a framed photo of Kara and Mike on their wedding day. I put them all in a pile by the front door. This invasion didn't happen overnight. I should have seen it coming. The signs had been there for 6 months, disguised as casual conversation. It started at Thanksgiving. Kara had just lost her job as a boutique manager unfairly. Of course, and Mike's hours at the warehouse had been cut. They were complaining about their rent. "It is just so expensive to live in the city," Kara had sighed, stabbing at her turkey. "And the air quality is terrible for the kids. Little Leo has had a cough for weeks. The doctor says he needs fresh, salty air." She had looked at me then, a long, meaningful look across the centerpiece. "Must be nice," she had said. "Waking up to that every day, even if it is just on weekends." I had ignored it. I took a sip of wine and complimented Mom on the stuffing. Then came the phone calls. "It seems silly," Mom had said in February, "that the house sits empty from Monday to Friday. Houses deteriorate when they aren't lived in. Olivia, pipes burst, mold grows. It needs life." "I have a security system, Mom," I had replied. "And the climate control is on. The house is fine." "But is it fair?" That was the word, fair. "Is it fair?" she had continued, her voice taking on that moralizing tone she used when she was about to ask for something unreasonable. "That you have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms all to yourself. While your sister is squeezing 4 people into a 2-bedroom apartment, you are family. You have so much. You have always had the luck." Luck. She called 60-hour work weeks luck. She called driving a 10-year-old car so I could save for a down payment luck. She called spending my weekends sanding floors and painting walls instead of partying luck. "I am not lucky, Mom," I had said, fighting the urge to scream. "I am tired, and the house is not available." I thought that was the end of it. I thought I had drawn a boundary. But boundaries, to my family, were just challenges. They were obstacles to be eroded, bypassed, or, as I now realized, simply bulldozed. They hadn't been asking me if they could move in. They were testing the waters. They were checking to see if the old Olivia the pleaser, the fixer, the doormat was still in there. And when I said no, they didn't hear a refusal. They heard a technical difficulty that needed to be worked around. I looked at the room allocation plan again. It was still on the counter where I had left it. The audacity of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just planned to crash. They had planned to displace. Olivia in the den, Olivia in the smallest room. It was a metaphor for my entire existence. Stay small. Don't take up space. Let Kara have the view. I crumpled the paper in my hand. Then, a thought struck me. A sharp, jagged realization that made the hair on my arms stand up. I walked to the front door. I looked at the lock. It was a heavy-duty deadbolt. I had installed it myself. There were no scratches on the metal. The doorframe was not splintered. The wood around the handle was pristine. I went to the back door, locked, no sign of forced entry. I checked the windows, all shut, all locked. So, how did they get in? They hadn't broken in. They had walked in. I closed my eyes, and the memory surfaced, clear and mocking. 2 years ago, I was going on a business trip to London for 10 days. I was worried about a hurricane forecast that looked like it might veer toward the coast. I had driven to my parents' house. I had sat at their kitchen table, drinking tea. "Here," I had said, sliding a shiny silver key across the table to my mother. "This is just in case. If the storm hits and I'm stuck in London, can you guys drive down and check the windows? Or if I lose my keys? It is strictly for emergencies." Mom had smiled. She had picked up the key and held it to her chest. "Of course, honey," she had said. "We will keep it safe. You don't have to worry about a thing. That is what family is for. I felt a wave of nausea. They had used my trust as a weapon. But it was worse than that. I looked out the window at the truck again. They had been here for at least an hour before I arrived. They had unlocked the door. But wait, I walked back to the kitchen drawer where I kept my spare keys. The emergency key I gave my mother was a copy of the old lock. I had changed the lock 6 months ago. After a breakup with an ex who refused to return his key, I froze. If I changed the lock 6 months ago, then the key my mother had from 2 years ago wouldn't work. My mind raced. How did they get in? I ran to the foyer table where I kept a small ceramic bowl for guests to drop their keys. It was empty. I thought back to the last time they visited. It was Easter. 3 months ago. They had come for lunch. Kara had been wandering around the house, admiring the renovations. Mom had offered to help clean up the kitchen while I took a work call in the den. My purse had been on the counter. My keyring had been in my purse. The nausea intensified. They hadn't used the emergency key I gave them. That key was useless. They had stolen my current key. During Easter lunch, while I was working to pay for the food they were eating, one of them, Mom or Kara, had taken my keys out of my purse. They must have driven to the hardware store in town, made a copy, and slipped the original back before I finished my call. This wasn't just a boundary violation. This was premeditated. They had been planning this since Easter, while Kara was crying about rent, while Mom was guilt-tripping me about empty rooms. They were sitting on a copy of my house key, waiting for the right moment to strike. I looked at the front door again. It looked different now. It wasn't just a barrier I had closed against them. It was a barrier they had already violated. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from Linda. "You are being hysterical. We are family. Open the door and let's talk about this like adults." "We have ice cream melting in the cooler." I didn't reply. I walked over to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then, I slid the chain lock into place. Finally, I wedged a heavy oak chair under the handle. It was a childish fortification, but I didn't care. I wasn't dealing with family anymore. I was dealing with parasites who had learned how to pick locks. I needed to do more than just lock them out. I needed to sanitize my life. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Kara. I searched for Locksmith Pelican Cove Emergency Service. I pressed dial. "Pelican Cove Lock and Key," a gruff voice answered. "I need an emergency re-key," I said. "All exterior doors. Immediate service. I will pay double for rush." "I am on a job, lady. Might be 2 hours." "I have intruders outside who have a stolen key," I said, my voice dropping to that cold, flat tone that scared even me. "And I am a single woman alone in a house on the edge of town." There was a pause. "I will be there in 20 minutes. I hung up. I looked at the pile of Kara's things by the door. The framed wedding photo stared up at me. Kara looked so happy, so triumphant. I picked up the photo and placed it face down. The giver, Olivia, was dead. She died the moment I saw that floor plan. The woman standing in the kitchen now was someone else entirely, and she was about to teach the Ross family a very expensive lesson in property law. I did not scream. I did not throw things. I did not engage in a shouting match through the door. The moment I heard the engine of the rental truck finally rev and retreat to the street, not leaving, just retreating to the curb like a besieging army setting up camp, I stopped being a daughter and started being a project manager. This was a crisis. In my line of work, you do not cry during a crisis. You mitigate risk. You secure assets. You document everything. I sat at my kitchen island, the cold stone pressing against my forearms, and laid my phone flat on the surface. My hands had stopped shaking. A terrifying clarity had washed over me, the kind that usually only comes after a car accident or a breakup, where the world slows down and details become hyper-visible. First, the physical security. I had already called the locksmith, a man named Miller, who I had used for my office building in the city. He was local to the county and owed me a favor for a rush job I had overpaid for last winter. I had told him it was an emergency. I told him I needed high-security deadbolts, the kind that defied picking, and I needed reinforced strike plates with 3-inch screws that went deep into the studs. I wanted the door frame to be stronger than the wall itself. "I will be there in 40 minutes, Miller had said. "Sit tight." 40 minutes was a long time. I picked up the phone again and dialed the non-emergency line for the local police department. I needed to know the rules of the game before my mother tried to rewrite them. "Officer," I said when a deputy picked up. I kept my voice professional, stripping away any hint of the hysterical female relative. "I need to ask a specific question regarding tenancy laws in this county. If a family member attempts to move into my home without a lease and against my will, at what point does it become a civil matter rather than criminal trespassing?" The deputy paused. "Well, ma'am, that depends. Do they have a key? Do they receive mail there? Have they spent the night?" "They have not spent the night," I said, my pen hovering over a notepad. "They do not have a lease. I have asked them to leave. They are currently parked on the street." "If they haven't established residency," the deputy said, "then they are guests who have overstayed their welcome. But if they get a piece of mail delivered there, or if they can prove they have been living there for a certain period, usually 30 days, but sometimes less if they show intent like moving furniture and it gets murky, then you have to evict them through the courts. You don't want that." "No," I said, my blood running cold. "I definitely do not want that. Intent. That was the key word. They had furniture. They had the intent." "Thank you, officer." I hung up. The clock was ticking. They weren't just trying to visit. They were trying to create a legal foothold. If they managed to sleep here, if they managed to get a utility bill in their name, I wouldn't be able to remove them without a 6-month court battle. I needed evidence. I opened my messaging app and found Marla's contact. I didn't want to call her and risk being overheard by my family outside. "Marla," I typed, "I am safe inside. Please do not engage with them. I need you to do something for me. Can you write down exactly what time they arrived? Can you write down the license plate of the truck and any other cars? And please, write down exactly what you heard them say to the movers. I need a log. This is going to be a legal matter." 3 bubbles appeared immediately. "I am already writing it down." "Honey," Marla replied, "your mother told the driver to park on the grass if you have to. I have timestamps for everything. God bless retired librarians. Next, the paperwork. My ownership of this house was a fact. But facts in a dispute are useless without documentation. I needed the indisputable weight of the government behind me. I grabbed my purse. I checked the peephole. The truck was parked on the street, about 50 feet down. Kara was sitting on the back bumper, smoking a cigarette, a habit she swore she had quit while my mother was on her phone, pacing aggressively on the sidewalk. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the guilt to set in, for me to open the door and apologize for being difficult. They would be waiting a long time. I went out the back door, slipping through the small gap in the fence that led to the alleyway, and jogged 2 blocks to where the downtown area began. I called an Uber from there to take me to the county recorder's office. I didn't want to move my car and give them a chance to block the driveway again. The county recorder's office smelled of dust and old toner. I walked up to the clerk, a woman with glasses on a chain who looked like she had seen every type of property dispute known to man. "I need a certified copy of my deed," I said, "and a certified copy of the last 3 years of property tax payments, and if you have the mortgage recording on file, I want that too." "You selling?" she asked, typing slowly. "No," I said. "I am defending." She looked up, assessed my rigid posture and the dark circles under my eyes, and nodded. She printed the documents on thick, heavy bond paper. She stamped them with the raised seal of the county. Thump crunch, thump crunch. The sound was incredibly satisfying. I held the papers in my hand. They were heavy. They proved that I, Olivia Ross, was the sole owner of the property at 42 Sandpiper Lane. Not Linda Ross, not Kara Ross, just me. I paid $20 for the copies, and it felt like the best money I had ever spent. On the ride back, I called the security company. "I need cameras," I told the representative. "I need full perimeter coverage, cloud storage, motion activation, and I need it yesterday." We are booked out until next Tuesday, the rep said. I will pay double for an emergency install, I said. I have a credible security threat. I can put you on the cancellation list, he offered, unimpressed. But until then, we can activate the pre-wired sensors on your windows if you have the code. I have the code, I said. Do it. My phone vibrated against my ear. Then it vibrated again, and again. I pulled it away from my face. The screen was a cascade of notifications. Incoming call. Dad. Incoming call, Mom. Incoming call, Kara. Text from Aunt Sarah. Olivia. Your mother is crying. What is going on? Text from Cousin Mike. Heard you locked your sister out. That's cold. Liv. The flying monkeys had been deployed. This was their standard operating procedure. When direct control failed, they outsourced the pressure, they triangulated, they turned the extended family into a weapon of mass guilt. I stared at the screen, the urge to answer, to explain, to scream, but they are stealing my house was overwhelming. It burned in my throat. But I knew what would happen if I answered. They would twist my words. They would gaslight me. They would say I was overreacting. They would make promises they never intended to keep. Just for a week. Just until we find a place. I did not answer. I set the phone to Do Not Disturb, allowing only calls from the locksmith and the police. Then, I composed a single text message. I added Mom, Dad, and Kara to the thread. I treated it like a legal notice. Do not enter my property. Do not attempt to open my doors. If you remain on the premises, you are trespassing. This is your only warning. I hit send. The response was immediate. My mother didn't even take time to capitalize her letters. You dare threaten police on your own mother after everything we did for you. You are sick, Olivia. Open this door right now. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of her message. I saved it to a new folder on my phone labeled Evidence. I arrived back at the house via the alleyway just as Miller's van pulled into the driveway. He blocked the entrance completely, which was a nice bonus. It meant the rental truck couldn't back in even if they wanted to. I met him at the back door. Rough day, Miller asked, eyeing the woman pacing on the sidewalk, my mother. You have no idea, I said. Front door first, then the back. I want the deadbolts replaced. I want the strike plates reinforced. And I want to know if anyone else has keys. If I change the cores, nobody else has keys, Miller said, pulling a drill from his belt. That is the beauty of it. I stood in the foyer while he worked, guarding the entrance. I scrolled through my phone, looking for anything else I could use. I checked my bank accounts to make sure they hadn't tried to access any shared files from years ago. Then, on a hunch, I opened a local Facebook group called Pelican Cove Beach Rentals. It was a private group for locals to swap leads on seasonal tenants. I had joined it years ago to keep an eye on market rates. Though I never rented my place out, I scrolled down, and then I stopped breathing. There, posted 6 hours ago, was a listing. Coming soon, prime beachfront cottage. 2. Bedroom plus den. Available for long-term summer lease starting immediately. Perfect for families. PM for details. The photos attached were from my Instagram, my living room, my view. The poster was not my mother. It was a profile named Beachside Living, a generic account with a stock photo. They weren't just moving in, they were planning to rent out a room, or maybe I looked at the floor plan again. Olivia in the den, Kara Mike in the guest room, Linda Ray in the master. Wait, if they were all moving in, why list it for rent? Unless they weren't all moving in. Unless the plan was even more parasitic than I thought. Maybe they were going to live here and rent out the den to a stranger to pay for their groceries. Or maybe Kara was going to sublet her apartment in the city and use my house as an income stream. House coming soon, the caption read. They were selling access to my home before they had even stepped inside. Ma'am, I jumped. Miller was standing in the doorway, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. The sound of the drill had stopped. All done, I asked, my voice tight. Yeah, front and back are secure. These are commercial grade. You could hit this with a battering ram, and the wall would give before the lock does. He handed me 2 shiny new keys. Thank you. Miller, put it on my account. Add a rush fee. He hesitated. He looked down at his boots, then back at me. He looked uncomfortable. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, Miller said, scratching the back of his neck. But you know I am the only licensed master locksmith in this zip code, right? I know. That is why I called you. Yeah, he said. Thing is, I wasn't the first call today regarding this address. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? About 4 hours ago, Miller said. Right before lunch, I got a call from a woman. Said she was the owner of 42 Sandpiper Lane. Said she lost her keys and needed the locks drilled out and replaced. Scheduled me for 3 o'clock. I looked at my watch. It was 2:45. Why didn't you come? I asked. I had a commercial job run long. Miller shrugged. I called her back to push it to 5, but she didn't answer. Then you called, and I recognized your voice, and I know you are the owner because I did the install 4 years ago. He gestured with his chin toward the street, where my mother was still pacing. That lady out there, Miller said quietly. She called me to change the locks on your house. Ms. Ross. She wasn't just trying to move in. She was trying to lock you out. The air left the room. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a coup. Thank you, Miller, I whispered. I will send the invoice, he said. He walked out, passing my mother on the driveway without making eye contact. I stood there, clutching the new keys so hard the metal bit into my palm. They had called the locksmith before they even arrived. They intended to change the locks the moment they got inside. They were going to lock me out of my own home, and when I arrived, I would have been the one pounding on the door. I looked at the text message from my mother again. You dare threaten police? I walked to the window and watched her. She didn't look like a mother anymore. She looked like a general whose ambush had failed. I wasn't just defending my property, I was at war, and I had almost lost before I even knew the battle had started. The truce lasted exactly 89 hours. I spent Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday inside the house, living like a squatter in my own property. I kept the blinds drawn. I parked my car in the backyard, hidden behind the high wooden fence, so from the street, the house looked dormant. I worked remotely, my laptop glowing in the dim light of the kitchen, jumping at every creak of the floorboards and every rustle of the wind in the dune grass. I knew they would come back. My mother was not a woman who accepted defeat. She only accepted delays. She viewed boundaries as temporary technical difficulties. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised peach. The humidity was already rising, sticking my shirt to my back as I stood by the window, sipping lukewarm coffee. I had been up since 5 o'clock, watching the street. At 8:15, the convoy turned onto Sandpiper Lane. It was not just the rental truck this time. The 26-foot beast was back, its white metal sides gleaming in the sun. But it was followed by a sedan I recognized. It was my cousin Mark's Honda. Mark was a paralegal who liked to think he was a high-powered attorney, and in the Ross family ecosystem, he was the designated witness. Whenever my parents wanted to bully someone into submission, they brought Mark along to use words like liability and obligation until the other person folded. They weren't just coming to move in. They were coming to stage a takeover. I watched as the truck idled on the street. They did not pull into the driveway immediately. They were cautious now. They knew I was inside. Linda got out of the passenger seat of the truck. She was wearing a floral dress, something bright and non-threatening, the kind of outfit you wear to a garden party. Kara climbed out of the back seat of Mark's car. She looked less put together than Mom. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun, holding the hand of my 5-year-old nephew. Leo, and his sister, Mia, immediately broke free and ran toward the sand. Carrying bright yellow plastic buckets, they were laughing. To them, this was just a beach day. They had no idea they were being used as human shields. Okay, Olivia, I whispered to the empty room. Game time. I did not go to the door. I walked to the kitchen island where my files were laid out in a precise grid. The certified deed, the tax records, the printout of the text message warning them to stay away, the log of the previous attempt. I picked up the phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I waited. I needed them to commit the act. I needed the aggression to be undeniable. Olivia. The shouting started before the knocking. Linda was on the porch. She didn't ring the doorbell. She pounded on the wood with the flat of her hand. Thud, thud, thud. Olivia, we know you are in there. Mark is here. We have a witness. You cannot lock family out of their own inheritance. I moved to the monitor for the security cameras. I hadn't been able to get the full system installed, but the pre-wired window sensors were active, and I had a clear view of the front porch through the peephole. Linda was banging on the door. Mark stood behind her, arms crossed, looking at his watch like he was billing for his time. But where was Kara? I checked the back window. There she was. Kara was circling the house, heading for the back deck. She was trying the handle on the sliding glass door. When it didn't budge, she rattled it violently. I saw her lean in, shading her eyes, trying to peer through the glass. "It is stuck," Kara yelled to the front of the house. "She jammed it." "She didn't jam it. She changed the locks," Linda screamed back. "Olivia, this is cruel. You are traumatizing these children." The children, I noted, were currently 50 yards away, digging a hole in the sand. Completely unbothered, I pressed the call button on my phone. 911, what is your emergency? "This is not a medical emergency," I said, my voice steady, low, and devoid of the panic that had gripped me on Tuesday. "I need police assistance at 42 Sandpiper Lane. I have multiple individuals attempting to force entry into my home. I am a single woman alone in the house. They are pounding on the doors and windows." "Do you know the individuals, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "They are estranged family members. They have been warned in writing not to trespass. They are refusing to leave." "Are they armed?" "They are aggressive," I said. "And they have a man with them I do not know well. Officers are on the way. Lock your doors and stay away from the windows." "The doors are locked," I said. "I will wait." I hung up. The pounding continued for 7 minutes. It was a long time. 7 minutes of my mother screaming that I was an ungrateful brat. 7 minutes of Kara yelling that I was selfish. 7 minutes of Mark shouting something about constructive eviction, which I knew was a legal term he was misusing. I stood in the center of the living room, clutching my file folder to my chest like a shield. I did not engage. I did not yell back. I let them exhaust themselves against the silence of the house. Then, the sirens cut through the morning air. The pounding stopped instantly. Through the window, I saw the flashing blue lights reflect off the side of the white rental truck. A police cruiser pulled up, blocking the truck in. A second cruiser arrived a moment later. 2 officers stepped out. One was a tall, older man with gray hair. The other was younger, looking sharp and serious. I watched Linda's demeanor change instantly. Her shoulders dropped. Her face softened. She walked down the porch steps with her hands clasped together, approaching the officers not as a trespasser, but as a concerned citizen. I could not hear what she was saying through the glass, but I saw the performance. She pointed at the house. She dabbed at her eyes. She gestured to the children on the beach. She pointed at Mark, who nodded solemnly. The older officer looked at the house, then back at Linda. He said something into his radio. It was time. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound of the tumblers clicking back was loud in the silence. I undid the chain. I removed the chair I had wedged under the handle. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. The humidity hit me again, but this time I didn't feel it. I felt cold, clinical. "Officer," Linda shouted, turning to point at me. "There she is. She's having a breakdown. She locked us out and won't let us get the baby's medicine." A lie. A brilliant, improvised lie. The older officer looked up at me. He walked up the driveway, his hand resting near his belt. "Ma'am," he asked, "are you Olivia Ross?" "I am," I said. I did not look at my mother. I did not look at Kara, who had run around from the back of the house. I kept my eyes locked on the law enforcement officer. "We have a report of a disturbance," the officer said. "Your mother here says this is a family dispute. She says they live here and you locked them out." "They do not live here," I said clearly. We do, Kara shrieked, stepping forward. We moved in on Tuesday. Our stuff is inside. Officer, I said, cutting through her noise. I am the sole owner of this property. I opened the folder. I handed him the certified copy of the deed. This is the deed, I said. My name is the only name on it. He took the paper, scanning it. I also have here, I continued, handing him the next sheet. A copy of a text message sent to all 3 of these individuals 3 days ago, instructing them that they are not permitted on the property and that their presence constitutes trespassing. The officer looked at the screenshot. He looked at the timestamp. And, I added, handing him the final document, here is a log from Tuesday when I first asked them to leave. They have never spent a night here. They have no lease. They have no keys. They are not residents. They are intruders. The officer looked at Linda. Ma'am, do you have a lease? We are family, Linda sputtered, as if the word itself was a legal binding contract. I am her mother. We don't need a lease. We are moving in to help her. Do you have mail addressed here? The officer asked. Is your name on the utilities? We just got here, Kara yelled. How could we have mail yet? She is throwing us out on the street. Look at my children. Do you want them to be homeless? The officer looked at the kids playing in the sand. Then he looked back at me. Are there children residing in this home? He asked me. No, I said. Those children reside at 12 Maple Street, in the city, with their parents. They have a primary residence. They are not homeless. My sister is attempting to move into my vacation home without my consent to save on rent. I took a breath and delivered the line I had practiced in the mirror. I do not consent to their presence. I want them removed from my property. The silence that followed was heavy. Mark, the paralegal cousin, stepped forward. Now, wait a minute, officer, Mark said, adjusting his glasses. There is a verbal contract here, implies consent. The family has an equity stake in the... Sir, are you a lawyer? The officer asked, cutting him off. I am a paralegal, Mark said. Then you know that a verbal contract for real estate is unenforceable, the officer said flatly, and you know that without a lease or proof of residency, the homeowner has the right to revoke access at any time. The officer turned to Linda. Ma'am, he said, his voice dropping the polite tone and adopting a command resonance. You need to leave. But, Linda started. No buts, the officer said. The owner has asked you to leave. You have no legal standing to be here. If you remain on this property, I will have to cite you for criminal trespassing. Do you understand? Linda turned pale. The criminal word had hit its mark. She cared about her reputation more than anything. Being arrested in a beach town driveway was not part of her script. This is ridiculous, Linda hissed, turning her venom on me. You are doing this to your own flesh and blood. For a house, you are sick. Olivia, you are selfish and sick. Get in the truck, I said, and take the furniture you left on the porch on Tuesday. We aren't taking anything, Kara screamed. I hope you rot in this big empty house alone. Ma'am, lower your voice, the second officer said, stepping closer to Kara. Pack up and move the vehicles. Now. It was over. The authority of the badge had shattered their delusion. I stood on the porch and watched. I watched Mark get back into his Honda, looking embarrassed, refusing to make eye contact with me. I watched Kara stomp down the driveway to collect the children, dragging them away from their sandcastle. Leo started crying, asking why they couldn't stay. Because your Aunt Olivia is a witch, I heard Kara say. I didn't flinch. Linda was the last to go. She walked to the truck, but then she stopped. She saw Marla, my neighbor, standing by the hedge. Marla was holding her phone up, clearly recording the entire interaction. Linda walked over to the hedge. She put on her tragic face again. Marla, Linda pleaded, her voice trembling. You know me. You know I'm a good mother. Can you believe she is doing this? She is throwing her family away like garbage. Tell her, Marla, tell her she is wrong. Marla lowered her phone. She looked Linda dead in the eye. She didn't smile. She didn't offer sympathy. "I think you should move your truck, Linda," Marla said coldly. "You are blocking my view." Linda gasped. It was a slap in the face she hadn't expected. She spun around, marched to the passenger side of the rental truck, and slammed the door so hard I felt the vibration through the porch floorboards. The truck engine roared to life. It belched a cloud of dark exhaust. The officer stayed at the end of the driveway, arms crossed, watching until the truck and the Honda backed out, turned around, and drove away down Sandpiper Lane. I watched them go. I watched until the white rectangle of the truck disappeared around the curve. The officer walked back up the driveway. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Thank you." "Get a restraining order," he advised quietly. "They don't look like the type to give up." "I know," I said. He nodded, touched the brim of his hat, and returned to his cruiser. I turned and walked back into the house. I closed the door. I locked the deadbolt. I engaged the chain. My legs finally gave out. I sat down on the hardwood floor of the foyer, surrounded by the silence. It wasn't a peaceful silence yet. It was the silence of a battlefield after the cannons stopped firing. I had done it. I had called the police on my mother. I had crossed the Rubicon. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down, expecting a hateful text from Kara. But it wasn't a text. It was an email notification. It was from the United States Postal Service. Confirmation of change of address request. I frowned. I hadn't requested a change of address. I opened the email. My heart hammered against my ribs, hard and painful. "Dear customer, we have received a request to forward all mail for the Ross family from 42 Sandpiper Lane to P.O. Box 889. No, that wasn't it. I reread it. We have received a request to forward all mail for Olivia Ross from 42 Sandpiper Lane to 12 Maple Street. I stared at the screen. They hadn't just tried to move in. While they were distracting me at the front door, while they were screaming and pounding, someone had triggered a request online. They were trying to forward my mail to Kara's apartment. If they controlled my mail, they could intercept my bills. They could intercept legal notices. They could intercept the deed paperwork. They could prove that I didn't live here anymore. I stood up. The cold feeling in my veins turned into ice. The truck was gone. But the war had just moved from the driveway to the database. They weren't just trespassers. They were identity thieves. The fluorescent lights of the Brinefall Development Group headquarters hummed with a frequency that seemed to drill directly into my frontal lobe. It was Monday morning. Usually, the sterile, climate-controlled air of the 42nd floor was my refuge. Here, problems were structural, financial, or zoning-related, all things that could be solved with a spreadsheet or a sternly worded email. Here, I was a senior project manager, I was competent, I was respected. But today, I felt like a fugitive hiding in plain sight. I sat at my desk, staring at a feasibility report for a new mixed-use complex in Charlotte. But the numbers were swimming. Every time my desk phone rang, my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every time an email notification pinged, I flinched. They had not returned to the house since the police escorted them off the property on Saturday. But the silence was not empty. It was heavy. It was the silence of a predator circling downwind, looking for a new angle of attack. "You are staring at that monitor like it just insulted your ancestors." I looked up. Holly, the director of marketing and the closest thing I had to a friend in this Shark Tank, was leaning against my doorframe. She held 2 cups of coffee. She set one down on my desk, right on top of a stack of blueprints. "You look like hell, Olivia," she said softly. "And I say that with love. But seriously, you have the complexion of a paper towel." I wrapped my hands around the paper cup, seeking the warmth. I had a rough weekend. Rough like bad date, or rough like I need to hide a body. Rough like I had to call the police on my mother and sister because they tried to annex my house. I said. The words tasted like ash. I hadn't planned to say it. In the corporate world, you do not have messy families. You have commitments and personal matters. You do not have mothers who try to drill out your locks. Holly's expression shifted from playful to sharp. She closed my office door and sat in the guest chair. Talk. I gave her the sanitized version. I left out the screaming match on the lawn and the specific venom of Kara's insults. I focused on the facts, the unauthorized movers, the changed locks, the police report. Holly listened, her eyes narrowing. That is not a family squabble. Liv, that is a hostile takeover. They are gone now, I said, trying to convince myself. The police scared them. People like that don't get scared, Holly said, shaking her head. They get creative, and they get mean. You made them look bad in front of an audience. Narcissists don't forgive public humiliation. I just want to do my job, I whispered. Listen to me. Holly leaned forward. Don't let them bait you. If you snap, if you yell, if you send one nasty text, they will use it. They will try to paint you as the villain to justify what they are doing. Don't give them the brush. Her words were prophetic. At 10:30 in the morning, my cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost sent it to voicemail, thinking it was a telemarketer or another one of Kara's flying monkeys. But something made me answer. This is Olivia Ross. Ms. Ross, this is Agent Miller from the Department of Social Services, Child Protective Services Division. The air left the room. My vision tunneled. Yes. My voice was barely a whisper. We received an urgent report this morning regarding the welfare of 2 minors, Leo and Mia Ross, the agent said. His voice was flat, bureaucratic, and terrifying. The report alleges that you have unlawfully evicted these children from their primary residence, rendering them homeless and without shelter. The room spun. They had gone nuclear. They weren't just fighting for the house anymore. They were weaponizing the government. They were willing to put a permanent mark on my record and potentially traumatize their own children with a CPS investigation just to hurt me. That is a lie, I said. I forced myself to stand up. I needed to be on my feet. That is a malicious and false report. Ma'am, the report states that the family was residing at 42 Sandpiper Lane and that you locked them out, leaving the children on the street. Agent Miller, I said, channeling every ounce of my professional composure. I am going to give you some facts. Please write them down. There was a pause. Go ahead. The children in question reside at 12 Maple Street with their paternal grandparents. That is their legal address. They have lived there for 6 months. They have never spent a single night at 42 Sandpiper Lane. It is a vacation property that I own solely. I took a breath. On Saturday morning, my sister and mother attempted to break into my property. I called the Pelican Cove Police Department. Officers arrived on the scene and verified my ownership. They instructed my family to leave because they were trespassing. There is a police report filed. I can give you the case number right now. I could hear typing on the other end of the line. Please give me the case number, he said. I rattled off the string of digits I had memorized. If those children are homeless, it is because their mother is refusing to take them to the home they already have. But I assure you, I saw them drive away in a rented truck and a sedan. They were not on the street. The typing continued for a long, agonizing minute. Okay, Agent Miller said finally. The aggression had drained from his voice, replaced by a weary skepticism. I see the police log here in the interagency system. It is flagged as a domestic dispute/trespass. It is a harassment campaign, I corrected him. My family is trying to coerce me into giving them my home. This report to you is part of that coercion. We see this more often than you would think, he sighed. Divorces, inheritance fights. People use the hotline as a weapon. However, Ms. Ross, I have to mark this as screened out, based on the police report and the verified alternative address. But I need to warn you. Warn me. If we get another call if they claim the children are being abused, or if they claim the environment at the grandparents' house is unsafe, we are legally obligated to investigate. We will have to interview the parents. We will have to interview the kids. It gets messy. You need to get your legal house in order. I understand, I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't put the phone back in my pocket. They had called CPS. They had accused me of making children homeless. I grabbed my notebook. I opened a new page. I titled it, The Escalation Timeline, Tuesday, 10:00 a.m. Attempted move-in, Tuesday, 2:45 p.m. Attempted lock change by impersonation, Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Second attempt, trespassing, Saturday, 9:15 a.m. Fraudulent change of address request, Monday, 10:30 a.m. False CPS report. I was no longer dealing with a greedy sister. I was dealing with a sociopath. I spent the lunch hour not eating, but archiving. I downloaded an app that recorded phone calls. I exported every text message from the last year into a PDF. I saved every voicemail. At 1:15, the receptionist called my desk. "Olivia, there is a Mrs. Gable here to see you. She says she is your aunt. She says it is a family emergency." Aunt Sarah, my father's sister, the peacemaker of the family. The woman who believed that apologizing was more important than being right. "Send her up to the conference room B," I said. "I will be there in 5 minutes." I walked into the conference room. Aunt Sarah was sitting at the long mahogany table, clutching her handbag. She looked small in the corporate setting. When she saw me, her face crumbled into a look of tragic disappointment. "Oh, Olivia," she said, reaching for my hands. I kept my hands at my sides. "Hello, Aunt Sarah." "Your mother is devastated," she began, skipping the pleasantries. "She hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. She says you looked at her like she was a stranger, like you hated her." "I looked at her like she was a trespasser," I said calmly, "because she was." "They are your family," Sarah cried, her voice echoing off the glass walls. "Kara is desperate. Do you know how hard it is for her? Mike is out of work. The apartment is cramped. They just wanted a summer to breathe, to heal. And you called the police on your own sister." "They tried to change my locks, Sarah," I said. "They tried to steal my house." "Steal is such a harsh word." She waved a hand dismissively. "They were just borrowing it. You weren't using it. God, Olivia, when did you become so hard? You used to be the sweet one, the generous one." "I am still generous," I said. "I pay my taxes. I donate to charity. But I do not donate my home to people who feel entitled to take it." "Just let them stay for 3 months," Sarah pleaded. "Just the summer. Let the kids have the beach. You can stay in the city. You work all the time anyway. Just sign a little paper saying they can stay until September. Peace will be restored. Your dad will stop drinking. Your mom will stop crying. Everyone will be happy again." It sounded so simple. Just give in. Just surrender the territory and buy the peace. I looked at Sarah. I saw the weakness in her eyes. She had spent her whole life enabling them, smoothing over their messes, asking the victims to apologize to the aggressors just to keep the noise down. "No," I said. "What? If I let them in for 3 months," I said, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. "They will stay for 3 years. They will claim tenant rights. They will destroy the property, and when I finally try to get them out, they will burn me to the ground. If I yield once, I lose a lifetime. I will lose my house, and I will lose my self-respect." Sarah stood up, her face flushing red. "You care more about that wood and glass than you do about people. You are going to end up a lonely, bitter woman, Olivia, and you will have no one to blame but yourself. I would rather be lonely in my own house than crowded in a shelter because my family stole my future," I said. "Please leave. I have work to do." She stormed out. I went back to my desk. I felt hollowed out, scraped clean. But I also felt lighter. I had said no to the guilt. I had looked the family obligation in the eye and recognized it for what it was, a hostage situation. I managed to get some actual work done in the afternoon. I reviewed the budget for the Charlotte project. I answered 20 emails. I started to feel like maybe, just maybe, I had weathered the storm. At 4:45, just as I was packing up my bag, a notification popped up on my screen. From HR, Employee Relations Subject, Urgent, Confidential Matter, Meeting Required. My stomach dropped to the floor. I clicked the email. "Dear Miss Ross. We have received a formal complaint regarding your conduct. The complaint alleges that you have engaged in erratic and dangerous behavior that may pose a risk to the workplace environment. Specifically, it has been reported that you are currently involved in a violent domestic situation and have exhibited signs of extreme instability. Given the serious nature of these allegations and our zero-tolerance policy regarding workplace violence markers, we need to meet with you immediately tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Please bring your badge. I stared at the screen until the pixels blurred. It wasn't enough to try to take the house. It wasn't enough to try to take the kids. They knew that without my job. I couldn't pay the mortgage. If I lost my income, the bank would take the house. And if the bank took the house, or if I had to sell it in distress, well, maybe a family member could step in and save it. They were trying to get me fired. Anonymous complaint. I knew exactly who had sent it, and I knew exactly which witness had probably helped draft the legal-sounding language about risk to the workplace. I printed the email. I put it in the folder with the police report and the deed. Holly walked by my office, saw my face, and stopped. "Liv," she asked. "What happened?" "They aren't trying to move in anymore," I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt like white heat. "They are trying to kill me, not my body, but my life. They want to burn it all down." I looked at Holly. "I need a lawyer," I said. "Not a real estate lawyer. I need a shark, and I need him by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." The email from Human Resources was a grenade thrown into my professional life, but the text message from Marla was a sniper shot. It came at 8:43 in the evening. I was still at the office, sitting in the dark, trying to draft a rebuttal to the anonymous complaint that claimed I was unstable. My phone lay face up on the desk, vibrating aggressively against the wood. "Olivia, don't call me. Someone is in your backyard. I can hear metal on metal. I think they are trying to pry the back door." The blood drained from my face so fast I felt dizzy. I did not reply. I did not hesitate. I dialed the Pelican Cove Police Department dispatch, directly a number that was now saved in my favorites, right under my dentist. "This is Olivia Ross," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. "I have a witness reporting an active break-in attempt at 42 Sandpiper Lane. I am the owner. I am not on the premises. Please send a unit to the rear of the property immediately." I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive usually took 90 minutes. I made it in 65. By the time I turned onto Sandpiper Lane, the flashing blue lights were already painting the neighborhood in a strobe of chaotic color. 2 cruisers were parked at erratic angles. Marla was standing on her porch in her bathrobe, talking to an officer. My house stood dark and silent, but it felt different now. It no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a crime scene. I parked and walked toward the officer, my heels sinking into the soft grass of the lawn. The humidity was thick, carrying the scent of impending rain and ozone. "Ms. Ross." The officer was young, with a buzz cut and a look of mild annoyance. "We did a perimeter sweep. Nobody is here." "My neighbor said she heard prying," I said, breathless. "She did." The officer nodded. He gestured for me to follow him. "Come take a look at the back door." We walked around the side of the house, past the AC unit, to the sliding glass door that led to the deck. The officer clicked on his heavy flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. "There," he said. I looked closer. The frame of the door. The expensive, weather-treated vinyl I had selected for its durability against salt air was mangled. There were deep, jagged gouges in the white material, right around the locking mechanism. The screen door had been slashed open, hanging in ribbons like torn flesh, but the most chilling detail was the scratch plate on the handle. It was scored with deep silver lines, the kind made by a heavy tool slipping and scraping against metal with force. "Crowbar," the officer said. "Maybe a large screwdriver. They really went at it, but the deadbolt you put in held. They didn't get inside." I reached out and touched the jagged plastic. It was sharp. It cut my finger. "They tried to break in," I whispered. "They didn't just want to enter. They wanted to force their way in." "Did you see anyone?" I asked Marla. who had walked over to the edge of the hedge. She looked small and frightened, clutching the collar of her robe. "I heard the noise first," Marla said, her voice trembling. "Like creak, snap, scrape, horrible sounds. I turned on my back porch light and yelled, 'I am calling the cops.' The noise stopped instantly. Then I saw someone run." "Who?" I asked. I couldn't see the face. "Honey, it was dark, and they were fast, but they ran toward the dunes, not the street. It was a woman, I think, or a small man. But definitely well. I saw hair, long, dark hair. It was flying behind them as they ran." Kara had long, dark hair. I looked at the officer. "My sister fits that description. She was here on Saturday screaming that she would get in one way or another." The officer sighed. He closed his notebook. "Ma'am, without a face, without a video. Dark hair isn't enough for an arrest warrant. Half the women in this county have dark hair. Unless we find fingerprints and on these outdoor surfaces with the salt spray, that is unlikely it is a vandalism report." "It is not vandalism," I said, my voice rising. "It is an attempted home invasion." "I will file the report," he said. "We will patrol the area tonight, but you need to secure this place." "I know," I said. The police left 10 minutes later. Marla went back inside, promising to keep her phone by her bed. I stood alone on my deck, staring at the mangled doorframe. The safety I had felt behind these locks was an illusion. A lock is only a deterrent to an honest person or a lazy thief. To someone motivated by entitlement and rage, a lock is just a delay. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I spent $3,000. I called the emergency number for a private security contractor, a different one than the local company that was booked up. I found a guy who advertised 24/7 rapid response and was willing to come out at midnight for a triple premium fee. By 4 o'clock in the morning, my house looked like a CIA safe house. We installed 4 high-definition cameras with night vision and audio recording. One pointed at the driveway, one at the front door, one covering the entire back deck, and one hidden in the dune grass looking back at the house. We installed motion sensor floodlights that were bright enough to blind a pilot, and I had him install a jimmy-proof steel bar on the sliding door that made it mechanically impossible to open from the outside without shattering the glass. When the contractor left, the sun was beginning to bleed gray light over the horizon. I sat in the kitchen, watching the live feed on my tablet. I logged into the police portal and uploaded photos of the damage. In the narrative section, I wrote suspect fits the physical description of Kara Ross, who has previously threatened entry, requesting this be added to the ongoing harassment file. I didn't have proof, but I knew. At 7:15 in the morning, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, a local area code. "This is Olivia, you evil little bitch." It was Linda. Her voice was unrecognizable guttural, shaking with a fury that sounded almost demonic. "Hello, Mother," I said, hitting the record button on my other phone. "I heard you told the police it was Kara," she screamed. "I heard you told the neighbors it was your sister who broke your door. How dare you? How dare you criminalize your own family?" I paused. "How do you know about the door, Mom?" There was a silence on the other end, a sharp intake of breath. "Marla," she sputtered. "Marla told someone, and it got back to me." "Marla hasn't spoken to anyone but me and the police since midnight," I said coldly. "And the police report isn't public yet, so unless you have a scanner, or unless Kara came home crying about a jammed door, you shouldn't know anything about a break-in." "You are twisting things," Linda shrieked. "Kara was home all night. She was with her children. You are paranoid. You are trying to frame her because you are guilty about hoarding that house if you file a report against her. Olivia, I swear to God, the family will never speak to you again." "If she is innocent," I said, looking at the monitor where my new cameras were cycling through their views, "then she has nothing to worry about. I installed military-grade cameras last night. If she wasn't here, the footage will show that." "If she was," I let the sentence hang there. "You put up cameras." Linda's voice dropped. It wasn't angry anymore. It was frightened. Goodbye, Mom. I hung up. I needed armor. Real armor. I went into the office late. I didn't care about the looks I got. I walked straight to Holly's office. I need a lawyer, I said. The shark you mentioned. I need him now. Holly looked at my face, the dark circles, the tightness in my jaw, and didn't ask questions. She wrote a name on a post-it note. Miles Ketter. He is expensive, Holly said. He handled my cousin's contentious divorce where the husband tried to hide assets in crypto. Miles found every penny and made the guy cry in deposition. He specializes in property disputes and high-conflict civil litigation. I don't care about the cost, I said. I called Miles Ketter's office from the stairwell. I explained the situation briefly, the unauthorized move-in, the trespassing, the CPS call, the HR complaint, and now the attempted burglary. This isn't a property dispute, Ms. Ross, Miles said, his voice gravelly and reassuringly bored, as if he had seen this 1,000 times. This is a siege. They are using swarming tactics. They attack your home, your job, and your reputation simultaneously to induce a state of exhaustion, so you will sign whatever they put in front of you. It is working, I admitted. I am exhausted. That is why you hire me, Miles said. I don't get exhausted. I get aggressive. Come in tomorrow at 10. Bring everything. And Ms. Ross. Yes. Do not engage. If they call, let it ring. If they show up, call the police. You are no longer their daughter. You are the plaintiff. I went back to my desk. I looked at the feasibility report for Charlotte. It seemed so trivial now. I started to see the pattern Miles was talking about. They didn't just want the house. If they just wanted housing, they could have used the money they spent on the moving truck to rent a storage unit or a cheap motel. They could have asked politely months ago. No. This was about the hierarchy. I had stepped out of line. I had bought something better than what they had. I had become successful without their help. My independence was an insult to their narrative that the family was a collective unit where everyone sank or swam together, mostly sank. By taking the house, they wouldn't just be getting a free vacation. They would be putting me back in my place. They would be reestablishing the natural order where Linda was the queen and I was the subject who existed to serve. They needed to push the button. They needed to see me jump. I left work early. I couldn't focus. I drove back to the beach house, checking the rearview mirror every few minutes to make sure the silver Honda wasn't following me. The house was safe. The floodlights were on, bathing the yard in a stark, clinical white light. I went inside, locked the door, braced the chair, and sat down in front of the camera monitor. I had hours of footage to review. The motion sensors had been triggered a few times by the wind, and once by a stray cat, but I needed to see what happened before the sensors were fully active. I needed to see the moment of the crime, even if I didn't have the cameras up then. Wait, I didn't have the cameras up during the break-in, but I had installed a doorbell camera 2 months ago. I had forgotten about it because it was battery-operated and the Wi-Fi signal was spotty at the front door. I pulled up the app for the doorbell. It hadn't alerted me last night because I had turned notifications off during the HR panic. I scrolled back to last night, 8:38 p.m. There was a clip. The video was grainy, black and white night vision. A figure walked onto the porch. They were wearing a dark, oversized hoodie with the hood pulled low, tight leggings, sneakers. The figure didn't ring the bell. They didn't knock. They stood with their back to the camera, shielding their hands with their body, but the camera angle was wide. I could see their right hand. The figure reached into their pocket and pulled out a key. My heart stopped. It wasn't a tension wrench or a lockpick. It was a standard house key. The figure slid the key into the deadbolt. They turned it to the left. It stuck. They jiggled it. They pulled it out slightly and tried again. It was the muscle memory of someone who had used a key to this house before. It was the old key, the one I had given my mother 2 years ago, the one she swore she had kept safe in the china cabinet. The figure tried for 30 seconds. When the lock refused to turn because I had changed the core with Miller on Tuesday, the figure slammed their hand against the door in frustration. Then, the figure turned. The hood obscured the upper face. But as they turned to jump off the porch and head toward the back of the house toward the sliding door they would eventually attack with a crowbar, the motion sensor light from the street reflected off something on their neck. It was a small, gold chain with a pendant, a distinct, lopsided heart shape. I zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the shape was undeniable. I had bought that necklace for Kara 3 Christmases ago. It was custom-made from an artisan on Etsy. I sat back in my chair. The room was cold, but I was sweating. It wasn't a burglar. It wasn't a stranger. It was my sister, armed with the key my mother had given her, coming to break into my home while I was at work. And she had tried the key first, which meant they didn't just want to break in. They thought they still had the right to walk right in. I saved the clip. I backed it up to the cloud. I emailed it to Miles Ketter. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in the dark, and waited for the war to begin. The legal assault did not begin with a shout. It began with a heavy cream-colored envelope delivered to my office reception by a process server who looked like he regretted his career choices. It was Wednesday, exactly 24 hours after I had watched the footage of my sister trying to jam a key into my deadbolt. I signed for the envelope. The receptionist, a 20-year-old intern named Jessica, looked at me with wide eyes. People at Brinefall Development did not get served with personal lawsuits in the middle of the workday. I walked into my office, closed the door, and slit the envelope open. The header was bold and terrified me more than the crowbar marks on my doorframe. Superior Court of North Carolina. Plaintiff. Linda Ross, defendant. Olivia Ross. I read the first page, then the second. By the third page, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like I had swallowed a live coal. The suit was for unjust enrichment and breach of implied contract. The narrative constructed in those legal paragraphs was a work of fiction that rivaled any fantasy novel. According to the document, the $5,000 my parents had given me 4 years ago was not a gift. It was a capital investment intended to secure a life estate for the family. It claimed that I had verbally agreed that in exchange for this substantial seed money, the property would be available for family use in perpetuity. They were suing me for the return of the $5,000, plus 4 years of accrued interest, plus damages for emotional distress caused by the illegal lockout. I grabbed my bag. I walked out of the office. I didn't ask for permission. I drove straight to the address Holly had given me. Miles Ketter's office was not in a glass tower. It was in a converted brick row house near the courthouse, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a donut shop. The waiting room smelled of stale coffee and old paper. Miles himself was a man who looked like he had been sleeping in his suit for 3 days. He was 55, with thinning gray hair and eyes that were sharp, dark, and completely devoid of sympathy. He read the complaint while eating a bear claw pastry. "Cute," Miles said, wiping a crumb from his tie. "Cute?" I asked, my voice rising. "They are suing me for my own house, Miles. They are saying they own a percentage of it." "No," Miles corrected me, tossing the document onto his cluttered desk. "They aren't saying they own it. They know they don't own it. If they thought they owned it, they would be suing for partition and sale. This is a nuisance suit. This is a shakedown." He leaned back in his creaking leather chair. "Your mother," he said, tapping the paper, "is trying to make you bleed. She knows a lawyer will cost you $5,000 just to answer this. She figures you will do the math. Realize it is cheaper to just give her the $5,000 she is asking for, or better yet, give her a key to make it go away. It is a war of attrition." "I am not giving her a key," I said. "I am not giving her a cent." "Good," Miles said, "because if you pay the Danegeld, you never get rid of the Dane. Now, tell me about this $5,000. Do you have a promissory note? A loan agreement? An I go to you, scribbled on a napkin?" "No," I said. "It was a check inside a greeting card." "Do you have the card?" "I threw it away 4 years ago," Miles grimaced. "Bad. Without documentation. It is, he said, she said. They will put your father on the stand to swear it was a loan. They will put your sister on the stand to swear she heard you agree to it. I have texts, I said. I pulled out my phone. I had spent the previous night archiving everything, digging through cloud backups I hadn't touched in years. I scrolled back to May of 4 years ago. Here, I said, sliding the phone across the desk. Miles put on a pair of reading glasses. He read the text out loud. So proud of you. Honey, Dad and I transferred $5,000 to your account today. Consider it a housewarming gift to help with furniture. Go buy that sofa you wanted, love, Mom. Miles smiled. It was a shark smile. That is beautiful, he said. The word gift is legally distinct from loan. You cannot retroactively decide a gift was a loan just because you are mad at the recipient. This text kills their breach of contract claim. So we can get it thrown out. Eventually, Miles said. But look at paragraph 14. I picked up the document again. I had missed paragraph 14 because my vision had been blurring with anger. Plaintiff seeks a temporary injunction to prevent the defendant from selling, encumbering, or altering the property until the resolution of this matter. They want to freeze the asset, Miles explained. They are afraid you are going to sell the house to get away from them. If the judge grants this, you can't refinance. You can't sell. You can't even rent it out legally without their permission while the case is active. They want to handcuff you to the house. Can they do that? They can try, Miles said. I will file a motion to dismiss based on the text message evidence. But the court docket is backed up. It might take 2 months to get a hearing. In the meantime, they are going to make your life hell. They already are, I said. I need you to go home, Miles instructed, opening a yellow legal pad. I need you to find every bank statement from the purchase. I need the wire transfer receipt for your down payment showing it came from your savings. I need your tax returns showing you paid the property taxes alone. I need utility bills. I need a paper trail that is so thick it could stop a bullet. I can do that, I said. And Olivia. Miles looked at me over his glasses. This lawsuit was filed yesterday. That means they have been planning this for at least a week. Lawyers don't draft these things overnight. They were smiling at you last week while they were preparing to sue you. The drive back to the office was a blur. I felt sick. My own mother had sat in a lawyer's office, probably a strip mall ambulance chaser, and authorized them to lie about me in a public record. When I got back to my desk, my keycard didn't work on the office door immediately. It took 2 swipes. My hands were sweating. I sat down and logged into my computer. The phone rang. Ms. Ross, this is Sarah from Human Resources. Can you come down again? I was just there yesterday, I said, my voice tight. We have had another report, Sarah said. Her voice was colder this time. We need to discuss it. I walked down to the HR suite. The air conditioning felt freezing. Sarah sat across from me, holding a notepad. We received a call on the ethics hotline about an hour ago, she said. The caller wished to remain anonymous, but they claimed that you used company vendors for personal renovations at your beach property, specifically, that you misappropriated construction materials. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. It was a hysterical, jagged sound. Let me guess, I said. The caller didn't have any invoices, any proof. They said it was common knowledge in your family, Sarah said, watching my reaction closely. My family, I said, is currently suing me because I won't let them vacation in my house for free. I just came from my lawyer's office. This call is retaliation. I pulled the court summons out of my bag and slammed it onto the table. Read it, I challenged her. Look at the timestamp. They filed this yesterday. I refused their demands on Saturday. This is a coordinated attack to destroy my livelihood, so I lose the house. If Brindefall Development takes action against me based on malicious nuisance calls from my estranged mother, my lawyer will be adding this company to my countersuit for wrongful termination. Sarah looked at the lawsuit. She looked at me. She saw the fire in my eyes. Okay, she said slowly. I see. We have to investigate every call. Olivia, that is policy. But if you can provide receipts for your renovations proving you paid for them personally, we can close this file. You will have them by morning, I said. I left the room. I was shaking, but I was still standing. They were trying to cut off my income. They knew I had a mortgage. They knew that legal fees would drain my savings. If I lost my job, I would be vulnerable. I went back to my desk and called Miles. "They just attacked my job," I said. "They called HR and accused me of theft." "That is defamation," Miles said, his voice perking up. "Now we are having fun. Now it is not just a property dispute, it is tortious interference with business relations." "I want them to stop," I said. "I want to send a letter, a warning." "I will draft a cease and desist," Miles said. "I will attach the screenshot of the gift text. I will tell them that if they do not withdraw the lawsuit and stop contacting your employer, we will sue for malicious prosecution and defamation. I will demand legal fees. I will scare them." "Do it," I said. "Send it by courier. Today." I left work at 6. I felt like I had gone 12 rounds in a boxing ring, but the blows kept coming. On the drive home, my phone pinged with a notification from Facebook. It was a tag. My cousin Emily, the one who usually only posted pictures of her cats, had shared a status update from Linda. It breaks a mother's heart when a child loses her way. We tried to help Olivia, but she has chosen money over family. We are just praying she gets away from the bad influences in her life. It is amazing what a young woman can afford when she has a sponsor paying for her beach house. We just want her safe. I pulled the car over to the shoulder of the highway. A sponsor. They were telling the family and anyone else who would listen that I had a sugar daddy, that I hadn't bought the house with my own hard work, that I was sleeping with someone for money. It was the ultimate insult. It undermined every sacrifice I had made. It turned my success into something dirty, and it explained why they felt entitled to the house. In their minds, I hadn't earned it. If some rich man bought it for me, why shouldn't the family get to use it? It wasn't mine. It was just spoils of war. I took a screenshot. My hands were steady now. The anger had crystallized into something harder. I drove the rest of the way to the beach house in silence. The house was dark, save for the motion sensor lights that clicked on as I pulled in. I checked the cameras. No movement. I went inside, locked the door, and poured a glass of water. At 9:30, Miles called. "I sent the letter," he said, "but I just checked the county clerk's online portal. I wanted to see if the lawsuit had officially hit the docket yet." "And it is there," Miles said. "But there is something else, filed at 4:55 p.m. today, just before closing." "What is it?" I asked, gripping the phone. "A notice of lis pendens," Miles said, "and a mechanic's lien." "A what?" "A mechanic's lien is a claim made by a contractor who hasn't been paid for work done on a property." Miles explained. "But you didn't hire a contractor." "No," I said. "The lien was filed by Ross Home Improvements," Miles said. "It claims unpaid invoices for $40,000 worth of renovations, and the signatory is Ray Ross." My father, who had come down for 2 weekends 3 years ago to help me paint the deck and drink my beer, was now claiming he was a contractor who had done $40,000 worth of work. "He is claiming he built the equity," Miles said. "A lien clouds the title. You can't sell. You can't refinance. The bank will see this and freak out. They are trying to trigger a default on your mortgage." I sank onto the floor. "They are lying," I whispered. "He helped me paint. I bought the paint. I bought the beer." "I know," Miles said. "But until we prove that in court, the lien sticks. They have put a clamp on your house, Olivia, and they forged a business identity to do it." I looked at the walls of my home, the walls I had sanded, the walls I had paid for. They weren't just greedy. They were trying to erase me. They were rewriting the history of this house to make me a tenant in my own life. "Miles," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Yeah. Burn them," I said. I don't care what it costs. I want you to burn them down." The ink on the affidavit was still wet when I handed it back to Miles Ketter. It was Thursday morning, and the air in his office was thick with the smell of aggressive litigation. We were no longer playing defense. We were launching a nuclear strike. "This is a counterclaim," Miles said. organizing the stack of papers with a terrifying precision. We are filing for abuse of civil process, defamation of character, tortious interference with business relations, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And because of the lien your father filed, we are adding a count for slander of title. Slander of title, I repeated. The phrase sounded heavy. He filed a false document to cloud your ownership, Miles said, looking over his reading glasses. In North Carolina, that is a big mistake. We are asking for statutory damages and legal fees. We are also filing an emergency motion to strike the lien as fraudulent. Do it, I said. And the restraining order? The temporary restraining order is being walked over to the judge's chambers as we speak, Miles assured me. Based on the police report regarding the prying at your back door and the attempted unauthorized entry with a stolen key, we have grounds, if the judge signs it, and I believe he will. If they step foot on your driveway again, they go to jail, no warnings, no discussions, handcuffs. It felt brutal to do this to the people who had raised me, but then I remembered the phrase, sugar daddy, circulating on Facebook. I remembered the call to CPS. I remembered the crowbar marks on my doorframe. They had stopped being my parents the moment they decided my destruction was an acceptable price for their comfort. One more thing, Miles said, pulling a subpoena form from his drawer. I am sending this to the internet service provider used to file the change of address request and the one used to send the anonymous email to your HR department. I want to know exactly whose IP address was used. If it was your sister's phone, we nail her. If it was a public library computer, we find out who logged in. Find them, I said. I left his office and drove straight to Brindefall Development. I was done hiding in the bathroom. I was done worrying about whispers. I walked into the HR suite with Holly by my side. She carried a binder we had assembled the night before. We called it the Truth Ledger. Sarah from HR looked up, surprised to see me so composed. I have the documentation you requested, I said, sliding the binder across her desk. Olivia, we are still reviewing the— You don't need to review, I interrupted calmly. You need to read. Tab 1 contains the receipts for every single renovation done on my property, paid for by my personal credit card or check. Tab 2 contains the police report filed regarding the harassment I am enduring. Tab 3 contains a letter from my attorney, Miles Ketter, outlining the defamation lawsuit we are filing against the source of these false complaints. I leaned forward, placing my hands on her desk. My family is attempting to leverage my employment to force me into a property settlement, I said. They are using this company as a weapon. If Brindefall Development continues to entertain anonymous, malicious tips without evidence, you are becoming a party to that harassment. I assume the company does not want to be named in a civil conspiracy suit. Sarah blinked. The corporate machinery in her brain jammed. She looked at the lawyer's letterhead. She looked at the police case number. We certainly do not, she stammered. If these receipts check out, we will close the ethics investigation immediately, and we will flag the caller ID if they try again. Thank you, I said. I walked out. Holly squeezed my arm in the hallway. You were terrifying, she whispered. I loved it. I am just getting started, I said. My next stop was not physical, it was digital. I scanned the affidavit I had sworn to regarding the children's residence. I attached a letter from the principal of the school Leo attended in the city, a document I had managed to get by calling the school and claiming I was updating emergency contact info which proved his daily attendance 3 hours away. I emailed the entire packet to Agent Miller at CPS. Agent Miller, I wrote, attached is proof of the children's primary residence and a copy of the restraining order filing against their mother and grandmother. Please note that any further reports accusing me of homelessness neglect should be viewed through the lens of this active litigation. Do not let your agency be used as a tool for extortion. I hit send. I had disarmed the bomb before it could go off. But silence is often the loudest warning. By Friday afternoon, the phone calls stopped, the text messages stopped, the social media tags stopped. It was the eye of the hurricane. Then, at 4 o'clock, my personal cell rang. It was my father. I stared at the screen. Ray Ross. Dad was the passive one. He was the one who sat in the armchair and watched TV while Mom rampaged. He was the one who slipped me $20 when Mom wasn't looking, but never stood up to her when she called me selfish. He was the enabler-in-chief. And now, according to the lien, he was my contractor, I answered. Hello, Dad? Livy. His voice sounded cracked, old. Jesus. Livy, a restraining order. A lawsuit against your mother. We got served the papers an hour ago. Mom is on the floor. She can't breathe. She should probably call a doctor then, I said, my voice devoid of the sympathy he was fishing for. Or maybe she should call a lawyer to explain what perjury is. It didn't have to be like this, he said. We are family. We can fix this. Just can I see you? Just me. No Mom. No Kara. Just father and daughter. Let's drink a coffee and stop this madness before it destroys us all. I hesitated. Miles had said, do not engage, but this was my dad. And if I could get him to admit the lien was fake, if I could get him to say it on a recording 1 hour, I said, the roasted bean on Main Street, public place. If Mom or Kara are there, I leave. If you yell, I leave. I will be alone, he promised. The coffee shop was busy, filled with tourists and locals trying to escape the humidity. I sat in a corner booth, my back to the wall, watching the door. I had my phone face down on the table, the recording app running. Ray walked in. He looked 10 years older than he had at Christmas. His shoulders were slumped, and he was wearing a stained polo shirt. He didn't look like a villain. He looked like a defeated man. He sat down opposite me. He didn't order coffee. You look good, Livy, he said. You look hard, but good. I am tired. Dad, I said. Tell me why you filed a lien on my house. Tell me why you lied and said I owed you $40,000. He looked down at his hands. I didn't want to. Kara said it was the only way to get your attention. She said you were spiraling, that you needed a firm hand to bring you back to reality. Reality? I scoffed. The reality where you steal my equity. It is not stealing, he pleaded, looking up with wet eyes. It is leverage. We just wanted you to come to the table. Mom, she is just trying to keep the family together. She thinks if we are all under one roof, things will go back to how they were, when you were little, when everyone was happy. I wasn't happy, Dad, I said quietly. I was compliant. There is a difference. We helped you, he insisted. That money, the $5,000, it was a lot for us. It was a gift, I said. Mom said so in writing. Technically, he waved his hand. But morally, you made it big, Livy. You have this big corporate job. You have this mansion on the beach. And Kara, she has nothing. Is it so wrong to expect the strong one to carry the weak one? That is what a pack does. That is what a family does. Kara is 35 years old, I said. She is not weak. She is lazy. And you have spent your whole life making sure she never faces a consequence. She is your sister. Ray slammed his hand on the table. A few people looked over. He lowered his voice, trembling. Look, just drop the lawsuit. Drop the restraining order. I will remove the lien. I promise. I will make Mom stop the legal stuff. And what do I have to do? I asked, testing the trap. Just compromise, Ray said. He reached across the table. Trying to take my hand, I pulled back. Just let Kara and the kids stay for the summer. Just 3 months. That is all. Let them have the summer to get back on their feet. You won't even know they are there. You can stay in the city during the week. It is a big house. Livy, there is room. I stared at him. After the police, after the locks, after the break-in attempt, after the defamation, after trying to get me fired. They still thought the endgame was Kara moving in. They hadn't heard a single word I said. They didn't respect my ownership. They didn't respect my boundaries. To them, my no was just a tantrum to be managed until I surrendered. You don't want peace, I said, standing up. You want capitulation. You want me to roll over. It is just a summer, Ray pleaded. Why are you being so stubborn? Because it is my house, I said, and because you are not asking. You are demanding. If you walk out that door, Ray said, his voice turning hard, the mask slipping completely. You are done. No Christmas. No birthdays. You are an orphan. Olivia, do you hear me? An orphan? I have been an orphan for a long time. Dad, I said. I just finally realized it. I walked out. I didn't look back. I got in my car and locked the doors. My heart was breaking, but my resolve was turning into concrete. I drove back to the beach house as the sun began to set, casting long, bruised purple shadows across the dunes. I was done. No more meetings. No more mercy. When I got inside, I checked the security system. Green lights across the board, but my phone rang. It was Miles. It was late for him to be calling nearly 8 o'clock on a Friday. Olivia, he said. His voice wasn't bored anymore. It was urgent. Did you get the judge to sign the order? I asked. Yes. The TRO is active as of an hour ago, Miles said. But that is not why I'm calling. Marla, your neighbor, she sent me a file. She has a camera on her back porch that points toward your side yard. It covers a blind spot your new cameras miss. And we have clear footage of the person who tried to pry the door on Wednesday night, Miles said. Was it Kara? I asked, bracing myself. I saw the necklace on the doorbell cam. That is the thing, Miles said slowly. The person on the doorbell cam, the one with the key that was a woman, that was probably Kara. But the person who came back 2 hours later, the one with the crowbar who mangled your doorframe. I gripped the phone. Who was it? It wasn't Kara, Miles said. It wasn't your father. It was a man, about 6'2", heavy build. Who? He turned his back to the camera at one point, Miles said. He was wearing a jacket, a work jacket. It had a logo on the back. What logo? Pelican Cove Moving Storage, Miles said. I froze. The moving company. The company my mother had hired to bring the furniture. Why would a mover come back to break in? I whispered. I don't know, Miles said. But I ran a background check on the owner of that franchise. His name is distinct. And here's the kicker. Olivia. He isn't a stranger. Who is he? His name is Trent Davis, Miles said. Does that ring a bell? The name hit me like a physical blow. Trent Davis, Kara's new boyfriend, the one she had vaguely mentioned months ago. The one she said was in logistics. He is Kara's boyfriend, I said, my voice shaking. Exactly, Miles said. And I just pulled his record. 2 priors for burglary and 1 for grand larceny. Olivia, this wasn't just a family trying to crash. They brought a professional thief into your driveway, and he came back to finish the job. The realization washed over me. The truck wasn't just a transport. It was a Trojan horse. They brought him here to case the joint, and when I kicked them out, he decided to come back for whatever he had seen inside. My family hadn't just betrayed me. They had marked me. Lock the doors, Olivia, Miles said. I am sending the police back. This is no longer a civil matter. Saturday morning broke with a deceptive calm. The sky was a polished, innocent blue, and the ocean looked like a sheet of hammered glass. Inside the house, however, the atmosphere was thick with the static of an ongoing investigation. I was no longer pacing. I was sitting at the dining table, which Miles had instructed me to turn into a war room. The revelation that the man with the crowbar was Trent Davis, Kara's boyfriend, had shifted the ground beneath my feet. It was no longer just a family dispute. It was a criminal conspiracy involving a man with a rap sheet. But Miles Ketter, in his gravelly wisdom, had told me that to truly nail the coffin shut in court, we needed to prove the intent of the entire group, not just the violence of one man. We needed to prove that my mother and father weren't just hapless victims of Kara's bad influence, but active financiers of the siege. At 10 o'clock, Miles called. He didn't say hello. I got the records from the rental truck company, he said. The subpoena works wonders when you threaten a corporate office with an accessory to burglary charge. What did you find? I asked, putting him on speaker and opening my laptop. It is interesting, Miles said, the sound of papers rustling in the background. The truck that blocked your driveway on Tuesday wasn't rented on Tuesday. It wasn't rented on Monday either. It was reserved 21 days ago. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. 3 weeks, I whispered. They told me it was a spontaneous decision. They said they were just driving down to check on me. It was never spontaneous, Miles confirmed. They planned this operation 3 weeks ago. But here's the kicker, Olivia. The rental agreement. It is not signed by Linda Ross. It is not signed by Kara Ross. Who signed it? A Mr. Peter Vance, Miles said. Cousin Peter, I said, rubbing my temples. Peter was a distant cousin on my father's side, a man who generally did whatever he was told and had the intellectual curiosity of a mossy rock. He is a middleman. They used him so their names wouldn't be on the contract. Exactly, Miles said. They thought they were being clever. If you sued, they could claim they were just passengers. But criminals always make a mistake when it comes to the money. Let me guess, I said. Peter didn't pay for it. Bingo, Miles said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Peter Vance signed the liability waiver, but the $600 deposit that was paid via a debit card ending in 4022. I knew that number. I had memorized it years ago when I used to help my parents balance their checkbook. That is my parents' joint checking account, I said. So, Miles said, we have proof that Linda and Ray Ross financed a vehicle for a move-in operation 3 weeks in advance, while using a third-party relative to hide their identity on the paperwork. That is not a family visit. Olivia, that is a calculated conspiracy to occupy. I looked at the kitchen island. I remembered the first day, Tuesday, when I had walked into the kitchen and found that piece of paper taped to the granite. The room allocation plan. It hadn't been a scribble on a napkin. It had been a printed document, a computer-generated floor plan with names typed in specific zones. The floor plan, I said to Miles. They had a printed map of the house with their names on the rooms. You don't print that the morning of a trip. They must have drafted it when they booked the truck. Send me a picture of that plan if you haven't already, Miles said. It goes to the judge. It proves premeditation. It proves they intended to displace you from your own bedroom before they even turned the key. I hung up, feeling a strange mix of nausea and vindication. They had been sitting at their kitchen table in the suburbs 3 weeks ago, plotting how to carve up my home. They had assigned me to the den like I was a piece of surplus furniture. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was an email from Sarah in Human Resources at Brindefall Development. Subject update on ethics complaint. I opened it, my heart rate spiking slightly. Dear Olivia, following your submission of the renovation receipts and the legal correspondence, we have officially closed the investigation into the allegations of theft. However, per your request to identify the source of the harassment, our IT security team flagged something regarding the second anonymous call. The caller used a burner number, but during the conversation with the intake officer, the caller attempted to prove their credibility by mentioning a personal detail about your medical history. Specifically, they referenced that you were hospitalized for exhaustion in 2015 and claimed this was a recurring pattern of instability. I closed my eyes. In 2015, I had worked myself into the ground to get a promotion. I had collapsed at a family barbecue. My mother had been the one to drive me to the urgent care. She was the only one who knew the clinical diagnosis on the discharge papers. She had used my moment of weakness, a moment where she had held my hand and told me to slow down, as a weapon to destroy my career 10 years later. I forwarded the email to Miles with a single note. Add this to the defamation suit. It was my mother. At noon, I saw Marla walking across the lawn toward my back deck. She was carrying a large, padded envelope. I unlocked the sliding door, the one with the reinforced bar, and stepped out. Mailman got confused, Marla said, handing me the package. He put this in my box. I think he's getting flustered by all the police cars lately. I looked at the label. It was addressed to Linda Ross, but the address was 42 Sandpiper Lane, my address. Don't open it, Marla warned, looking at the return address. That is a federal offense. Isn't it opening someone else's mail? I looked at the return address, Coastal Carolina Power Light. I don't need to open it to know what it is, I said, my voice cold. But I need to confirm it. I took the package inside. I did not break the seal. Instead, I called the customer service number for the power company. "This is Olivia Ross," I told the representative. "I am the account holder for 42 Sandpiper Lane. I am holding a package from your office addressed to a Linda Ross at my address. I need to know why you are sending mail to a third party at my home." There was a clicking sound on the line. "One moment. Ms. Ross, I see here there is a pending service transfer request." The world stopped spinning for a second. "A transfer request?" I asked. "Yes, ma'am. We received a new service application on Wednesday. The applicant, Linda Ross, submitted a request to transfer the electric billing into her name starting this coming Monday. She provided a lease agreement number." "There is no lease," I said, gripping the edge of the counter. "I am the owner. I did not authorize a transfer. That application is fraudulent." "Oh," the representative sounded alarmed. "Well, we haven't processed it yet because the credit check is pending, but she uploaded a document. It looks like a residency affidavit." "Cancel it," I commanded. "Flag the account. No changes are to be made without my voice authorization and a password, and I want a copy of that application sent to my email immediately for legal purposes." "If I can do that, ma'am." I hung up and looked at the unopened envelope. It wasn't just about saving money on a vacation. If Linda got the utility bill in her name, she would have a government-recognized proof of residency in North Carolina. If you can prove you pay the bills and receive mail, you are a tenant. If she had succeeded, the police couldn't have removed her for trespassing. They would have told me it was a civil matter and that I had to evict her. They weren't trying to visit. They were trying to build a paper fortress. They wanted to create a legal reality where they lived here, and I was just the landlord they were disputing with. That was why they brought the furniture. That was why they filed the change of address. That was why they tried to switch the power. They were engaged in a hostile takeover of my life. I sat down and looked at the timeline of escalation I had built. The pieces were finally locking together. The middleman booking the truck meant they knew I would say no. The room plan meant they intended to stay permanently. The change of address and utility transfer meant they were manufacturing tenancy rights. The lien from my father meant they were trying to block me from selling the house once they occupied it. It was a masterclass in grifting, and my parents, who couldn't figure out how to program a DVR, were not capable of this level of sophisticated fraud. They had help. I thought about the man in the video, Trent Davis. Miles had said he had a record for burglary, but Miles had also said something else. Kara's new boyfriend has a history of shady documents. I went back to the security footage from Wednesday night, the night the door was pried. I watched the clip again. The large man in the Pelican Cove moving jacket. He tried the door. He used the crowbar. But then, I saw something I had missed before. He wasn't just trying to break in. After he gave up on the door, he didn't run away immediately. He walked over to the electrical meter on the side of the house. He pulled out a phone and took a picture of the serial number on the meter. Why would a burglar photograph an electric meter? Unless he needed the serial number to fill out a new service application for the power company. The application the power company received was submitted on Wednesday, the same night Trent was in my yard. Trent Davis wasn't just the muscle. He was the architect. He was the one who knew how tenancy laws worked. He was the one who told my mother, "If you get a bill in your name, she can't kick you out." He was the one who told my father, "File a mechanic's lien. It will freeze the title." My family had invited a wolf into the fold, and he was teaching them how to hunt me. I called Miles back. "I know who is running the show," I said. "It is Trent. He photographed my meter to help them steal the utility account. He is coaching them." "That fits," Miles said. "I did a deeper dig on Mr. Davis. He used to work for a property management company before he got fired for embezzlement. He knows the loopholes in the eviction laws better than most lawyers. He is using your family to get a free beach house for himself." "They are puppets," I said. The realization was bitter. My mother thought she was fighting for family unity, but she was actually committing felonies at the behest of a con artist who was sleeping with her daughter. "We have the hearing on Monday for the restraining order," Miles said. "I am going to subpoena Trent Davis to appear." "He won't come," I said. "He might not," Miles agreed. "But if we can prove he was the one on your property, we can get him included in the order. And Olivia, I have a feeling he's going to try one last thing before the court date. Grifters like this, they don't like losing a mark." That night, I didn't sleep. The house was a fortress of light and sensors. I sat in the living room, watching the monitors. At 2:30 in the morning, the motion sensor at the edge of the driveway triggered. I leaned forward. A car had pulled up on the street. It wasn't the rental truck. It wasn't the silver Honda. It was a battered pickup truck. A man got out. He didn't come up the driveway. He walked to the edge of my property line, right where the mailbox stood. The street lamp above him flickered, casting a pool of yellow light. He looked up at the house. He wasn't wearing a hood this time. He was wearing a baseball cap, but his face was visible. It was the man from the Pelican Cove moving jacket. It was Trent Davis. He stared directly at the camera I had mounted on the porch eaves. He knew it was there. He smiled. It was a smug, arrogant smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stack of envelopes. He stuffed them into my mailbox. Then he turned, got back in his truck, and drove away. I waited 10 minutes to make sure he was gone. Then, grabbing a flashlight and a can of pepper spray, I walked out to the mailbox. I opened the metal door and pulled out the letters. There were 5 of them. They were all addressed to Trent Davis. At 42 Sandpiper Lane, they were empty envelopes. He had mailed them to himself. They were postmarked 2 days ago. He was planting evidence. He was physically salting the mailbox with mail in his name so that if the police came, he could pull them out and say, "I live here. Look at my mail." I stood in the driveway, clutching the fake mail. They were desperate. They were trying to manufacture a reality that didn't exist. But they had made a fatal mistake. By walking up to the mailbox, Trent had stepped into the high-definition zone of my new camera system. I had his face. I had his truck. I had him stuffing the mailbox at 2 in the morning. I walked back inside and emailed the clip to Miles. Subject: the smoking gun. Message: he just delivered his own eviction notice. Monday was going to be a bloodbath, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of my mother's tears. I was only looking forward to the judge's gavel. The courtroom was colder than the morgue. It was Monday morning, and the air inside the county courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Miles Ketter, my hands folded on top of a 3-inch binder that contained the autopsy of my family relationships. On the other side of the aisle, they sat like a tableau of misunderstood martyrs. Linda was wearing a pastel cardigan that made her look frail and grandmotherly. Ray sat hunched over, staring at his shoes. Kara was dressed in black, clutching a tissue, looking for all the world like a grieving widow rather than a woman who had tried to hijack a beach house. They had a lawyer with them, a nervous-looking man named Mr. Henderson, who looked like he handled mostly traffic tickets and was realizing, too late, that he had stepped into a minefield. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Moore entered the room. She was a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for having zero tolerance for nonsense. "We are here for a hearing on a request for a permanent restraining order," Judge Moore said, adjusting her glasses. "Plaintiff Olivia Ross versus Linda Ross, Ray Ross, and Kara Ross. Mr. Henderson, your clients are the respondents. You may make a brief opening statement." Mr. Henderson stood up. "Your Honor, this is a tragic misunderstanding. My clients are loving parents and a sister who were simply trying to ensure the safety and well-being of the family. There was no intent to harm. They believed they had a right to be on the property due to a financial investment they made years ago. They were attempting to move in to provide a summer vacation for 2 young children. The plaintiff's reaction calling the police, locking them out, is a hysterical overreaction to a family visit." Linda dabbed her eyes. It was a perfect performance. "We just wanted to help," Linda whispered loud enough for the microphone to catch. "She lives all alone. It is not natural." "Your Honor," Kara piped up, her voice trembling. "My children cry every night. They don't understand why Aunt Olivia hates them. We just wanted them to see the ocean." Judge Moore looked at me. "Ms. Ross, your counsel may proceed." Miles Ketter stood up. He didn't smooth his suit. He didn't smile. He looked like a demolition expert checking his detonator. "Your Honor," Miles said, his voice gravelly and low. "The defense uses words like family and visit. We will use words like trespassing, burglary, fraud, and conspiracy. We are not asking for a family counseling session. We are asking for protection from a coordinated siege." "Proceed," the judge said. "Exhibit A," Miles said, handing a document to the bailiff. "The warranty deed for the property at 42 Sandpiper Lane. It lists one owner, Olivia Ross, not Linda, not Ray, just Olivia." "We know she owns it," Henderson interrupted, "but my clients contributed." "Exhibit B," Miles cut him off. "A text message from Linda Ross dated 4 years ago. Mom, we transferred $5,000 to your account today. Consider it a housewarming gift to help with furniture. In North Carolina law, a gift does not purchase equity. It does not purchase tenancy. It purchases a thank you card, which my client sent." Linda stiffened in her chair. "Now," Miles continued, pacing slowly, "let us address the visit. The defense claims this was a spontaneous family trip. Exhibit C is a subpoenaed record from Budget Truck Rental. The 26-foot moving truck that blocked my client's driveway last Tuesday was reserved 3 weeks ago. It was paid for by a debit card belonging to Linda and Ray Ross, but the reservation was made in the name of a cousin, Peter Vance." Miles turned to look at Linda. "Why use a cousin's name if it was just a family visit? Why hide? Because they knew my client would say no. This was an ambush." "That is circumstantial," Henderson argued weakly. "Then let us talk about the locks," Miles said. "Your Honor, the respondents claim they had a right to enter. They claim they have a key, but my client changed her lock 6 months ago." He paused for effect. "So, imagine our surprise when we reviewed the security footage from Wednesday night, the night after the police removed the family from the property." Miles nodded to the clerk. "Please play video file 1. The monitor on the judge's bench flickered to life. The courtroom watched in silence as the black and white night vision footage played. A figure in a hoodie walked up to my front door. "Pause," Miles said. "Zoom in on the hand." The image blurred, then sharpened. The figure was holding a key. They tried to insert it into the lock. They jiggled it. They slammed their hand against the door in frustration when it didn't turn. "This person has a key," Miles said. "But it is the old key. The key my client gave her mother 2 years ago for emergencies. The key Linda Ross swore she kept in a safe." Linda's face went pale. She started shaking her head. "That is not me," she hissed. "I was at the hotel." "No, it is not you." Miles agreed. "The figure is too tall, but look at the neck." He zoomed in further. The lopsided heart pendant glinted in the light. "That is a custom necklace," Miles said. "Worn frequently by the respondent, Kara Ross." Kara gasped. She instinctively reached up to her neck. But she wasn't wearing it today. The damage was done. The judge's eyes narrowed. "But here is the twist," Miles said. "Video file 2. 2 hours later, same night." The screen changed. This time, it was the footage from Marla's back porch camera. It showed the back of my house. A man walked into the frame. He was wearing a jacket with Pelican Cove moving on the back. He walked to the sliding glass door. He produced a crowbar. The sound of metal screeching against metal filled the silent courtroom. Creak, snap, the man worked on the door for 2 minutes. When he couldn't get in, he kicked the frame and spat on the deck. Then, he walked to the electrical meter and took a photo with his phone. "Who is that?" Judge Moore asked, leaning forward. "That," Miles said, "is Mr. Trent Davis. He is a convicted felon with a record for burglary. He is also the current romantic partner of Kara Ross." The courtroom went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Linda and Ray looked at Kara. Their shock looked genuine. They knew about the truck. They knew about the key. But they didn't know their daughter had sent her boyfriend to break in with a crowbar. "I didn't tell him to do that," Kara shrieked, standing up. "He was just supposed to check if the back door was open. He wasn't supposed to break it." "Sit down, Mr. Henderson hissed, pulling her arm. "So you admit you sent him?" Miles asked smoothly. Kara froze. She realized what she had just done. She had confessed to conspiracy on the record. "Your Honor," Miles said, turning back to the bench, "the family hired a truck. They provided the old key, and when that failed, their associate attempted forcible entry, but Mr. Davis did something else. He photographed the meter." Miles held up a piece of paper. "This is a fraudulent application for electrical service, submitted the very next morning in the name of Linda Ross. They weren't just breaking in. They were trying to establish residency by fraud, so the police couldn't remove them again." Judge Moore looked at Linda. "Ms. Ross, did you submit this application?" Linda stammered. "I just thought if I paid the bills, it would be a gesture of good faith." "It is identity theft," Judge Moore said coldly, "and it is fraud." "There is one final thing," Miles said. "The coup de grace. A mechanic's lien filed against the property on Thursday, claiming $40,000 in unpaid renovations." Miles held up the lien. "It is signed by Ray Ross, acting as a contractor. Mr. Ross, are you a licensed contractor?" Ray didn't answer. He just hung his head. "Did you perform $40,000 of work on this house?" Miles pressed. "I helped paint the deck," Ray whispered. "The paint cost $300, Miles said. "And my client bought it. This lien is a falsified legal document intended to slander the title and prevent my client from selling her home to escape this harassment." Miles dropped the papers on the table. "They called CPS and made a false report about homeless children. They called her employer and made false reports about theft. They tried to break down her door. They tried to steal her mail. This is not a family, Your Honor. This is a criminal enterprise." Judge Moore took a deep breath. She looked at the respondents. Her face was hard as stone. "I have sat on this bench for 20 years, Judge Moore said. "I have seen messy divorces. I have seen feud. But I have rarely seen a family work so hard to destroy one of their own simply because she was successful." She looked at Linda. "You claim you wanted to be close to your daughter. You have achieved the exact opposite. You have ensured she will never trust you again." She banged the gavel. "I am granting the permanent restraining order. Linda Ross, Ray Ross, Kara Ross, and Mr. Trent Davis are hereby prohibited from coming within 500 yards of the plaintiff, her home, or her place of employment. You are prohibited from contacting her by phone, email, text, or social media. You are prohibited from contacting her employer." The judge leaned forward. "Furthermore, I am striking the mechanic's lien as fraudulent, and I am referring the evidence regarding the attempted burglary, the false CPS report, and the fraudulent utility application to the district attorney's office. If I were you, I would hire a criminal defense attorney immediately." Linda gasped, clutching her chest. "Criminal, but I am a mother." "That is not a legal defense for burglary, ma'am," the judge said. "Court is adjourned." The bailiff stood up. I didn't move for a moment. I just breathed. The air in the courtroom didn't smell like anxiety anymore. It smelled like freedom. I stood up and gathered my papers. As I walked toward the exit, I had to pass them. Linda was sobbing into Ray's shoulder. Ray looked like a ghost, but Kara was standing there, her eyes dry and full of venom. As I passed, she leaned in. "You think you won," she hissed. "You are going to be all alone in that big house. You will regret this. You have no one now." I stopped. I turned and looked her in the eye. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel guilt. I felt a profound sense of clarity. "I would rather be alone in a house I own," I said calmly, "than be crowded in a prison cell you built. Goodbye, Kara." I walked out of the double doors. I walked out of the courthouse and into the blinding sunlight of the North Carolina afternoon. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go back to the office. I drove straight to Pelican Cove. The drive took 90 minutes. I watched the scenery change from concrete to pine trees to sand dunes. When I pulled into the driveway, the rental truck was gone. The police cars were gone. The street was quiet. I walked up the steps to my front porch. I looked at the doorframe. It was still scarred where Trent had tried to force the other door, a reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. I took the new key out of my pocket. It was heavy, cool, and sharp. I slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, satisfying click. I stepped inside. The air was cool and smelled of lavender and sea salt. It was quiet. I walked through the living room, past the ghost of where they had tried to put the play area. I walked into the kitchen where the room allocation plan had been taped. It was just a kitchen now. My kitchen. I walked to the sliding glass door and looked out at the ocean. The waves were crashing against the shore. Indifferent to my little war. Kara was wrong. I wasn't alone. I was free. Revenge. I realized as I watched a seagull arc over the water, wasn't about making them suffer, though the criminal charges would certainly do that. Revenge wasn't about screaming or fighting. Revenge was the sound of a lock clicking shut, keeping the chaos on the other side. It was the absolute, non-negotiable boundary. They had tried to force their way into my life because they thought they owned me. Now, they were legally erased from it. I took a sip of the cold water, leaned my head against the cool glass, and finally, for the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled. The locks were changed, and they were never, ever getting a key again. Thank you so much for listening to this story of boundaries, betrayal, and the ultimate legal clapback. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening from a beach house, a city apartment, or maybe on your commute? Drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed seeing Olivia stand her ground, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help this story reach more people who need to know that no is a complete sentence. Stay safe, stay strong, and keep your locks changed.